Well, hello and welcome to the last video on Trichinella spiralis, on the parasites, the worms, that sort of thing, that we were looking at the Food Safety Inspection Services guidelines, how they were doing it. And we'll start that right now because the quicker we get into it, the quicker we get it over with, right? Now that we got that out of the way, we got the intro, the title out of the way, I want to remind you to please, if you like these videos, if I'm bringing to you something you may not have seen widely all over the internet and, YouTube, Rumble, all the different places where everybody just duplicates what everybody else did. Recipe sites, that sort of thing. If I'm bringing you anything new, I would like to first thank you for sitting and waiting through it, because not all my videos are short. But please help me with my digital footprint. Do the comment, the subscribe, and the sharing of these videos to anybody and everybody you can get to look at them. What are we talking about? Well, we're going to start with, in 2018, there was a major change where we went to a HACCP plan from the prescriptive rules, the CFRs, that you must do this, you must do that. It went more towards what we call up here, and we just said it, it's up here, it's called a HACCP, or a Hazard Analysis Critical Control Point. It's a systematic and preventative approach to food safety that identifies, evaluates, and controls biological, chemical, and physical hazards in food production, from raw material to production to consumption. So we get it all the way through the process, what they're saying. And that's what they're talking about. Now, when we see some of the videos, I don't know what order they're going to come out, even though I've got some numbers on some of them. The big idea is this. Instead of saying, you have to freeze, you have to do this, or you have to irradiate, you have to do, what they're doing is they're giving you, the government, 2018 came up with a rule change that says, okay, you have to have a plan, and we will, through the inspection service, we're going to look at that plan and see if it makes sense. Now, because I started this series on freezing, because that's the most logical place, is as I get my raw materials in, which are just, store-bought Boston butts and cryopacks, first thing I do is freeze them, because that is enough for a control plan for the Trichinella, not for everything else. And we talked about the trilogy, I called it, the power of three, where we have parasites, we have the spoilage and contamination versions, where botulism and listeria a lot, because both of those could be fatal. And of course, then we have the spoilage, the ones that wouldn't necessarily result in, quote, food poisoning, but they would ruin your product. So we kind of have those three things, three legs. You got to have all of them under you, else the tripod falls down and you fail the job. So if we go back to this, that's what a HACCP is. It is a total written plan that we would put together and say, this is how we handle our business's production. Now, if you're in a kitchen, you're just making stuff for yourself, you might say, well, what is that all about? We're not going to need all that because we're just a simple little action. Well, here's my AI overview that tells us where we went from prescriptive to the HACCP, which makes it a little bit better and a little bit worse in some respects, depending on how you want to look at this. Now, we see this. It says in 2018, the USDA, Department of Agriculture's Food Safety and Inspection Service, eliminated its prescriptive manual requirements for controlling Trichinella in pork and shifted the responsibility to processing establishments under their own hazard analysis and critical control point plans. The detailed 2018 guide is therefore not a single manual, but is contained within the FSIS directives and compliance guidelines related to the HACCP. So here we have our manual, and you can get that name down if you want to Google it, like I did in the first video. FSIS compliance guidelines. See, it's not a rule and it's not a law. It's not a code of regulation. It's a guideline for prevention of control of Trichinella and other parasitic hazards in pork products, 2018. Now, we already opened this up a long time ago in the previous said video, and I'm going to come down here till I see this. And we're going to see, it says there is a great variety of processes. And they're opening it up and say, look, you got to take care of it yourself. We're just going to inspect it, see if you're following your own written. So what this is going to do is it's going to give us several different methods as suggestions. They're not mandating these, they're just suggestions. Since we're talking about sausage now, we've gone through freezing, which for me is for all my pork. I do that. And then we had the coppas, which is a little different treatment. We had method 6 and 7, I think it was. So here we are with method 1. It's for sausage. And it says the sausage may be stuffed in an animal casing, hydrocellulose casings, or cloth bags during any stage of the treating of the sausage to destroy trichinella, live trichinella, except as provided in sausage treatment number 5. These coverings should not be coated with paraffin like the substance, or should any sausage be washed during the prescribed period of drying. In the preparation of sausage, one of the following methods may be used. Okay, so it's going to jump down here, and let me just look at this because I'm going to talk about it a little bit right here. This one is number drying. I just want to read a couple of sentences. I know I don't read well. It says the meat should be ground or chopped into pieces not exceeding 3/4 of an inch in diameter. A dry curing mixture, that's going to be your salt or your cures, containing not less than 3 1/3 pounds of salt to each hundredweight. That's 3.5% salt of the unstuffed sausage should be thoroughly mixed and ground or chopped meat. So what we're looking at is after being stuffed, the sausages having a diameter not exceeding 3.5 inches, measured at the time of stuffing, not when it's dried because they'll shrink. A lot of them will shrink. Should be held in a drying room not less than 20 days at not less than 45 degrees, except for the variety known as pepperoni. That's special. We get them in much smaller casings and they dry real fast. So it's 1 3/8. I got like 1.5 inch casing. It's nominal. So it goes down to 15 days. Now, before it dries to 1 5/8 or 1 3/8, inch and a half, it just says it's got to be dry. The stuffing period may be reduced to 15 days. And the 15 days is from this 20 days minimum. All right. However, the sausage cannot be released from the drying room in less than 25 days, which kind of makes me wonder, whenever I have seen this, let me come down here where I can control my thing. It's 20 days by rule in method number 1, with the exception of pepperoni, which could be 15 days in drying, but you can't leave the drying room for 20 days. So all I'm thinking is, perhaps at 15 days we can call the drying done, and we'll wrap them in plastic bags, getting our packaging ready so that they can do what we might call equalize. If we dry it fast and it shrunk up, the inside still may be a little bit moist. So if we seal it so we can't lose any more moisture through the outside of the casing, it will normalize just like cold in a big walk-in cooler. You might have a hot spot over here and a cold spot over here, but you circulate the air enough, it's going to all pretty well much equalize out or stratify. Method number 2 is smoked, then dried. The meat should be ground or chopped into pieces not exceeding 3/4 of an inch in diameter. A curing mixture not containing less than 3 1/3 pounds. That's that same rating. Hey, let me take a quick shot here. All right. I have my little box of grinding plates. This one, let me take it out. This one is 3/4 of an inch. It just says if you use this, and see how big that is? I don't know, because I'm in the background, it may not want to read that, but if we're in HD, Uber HD here at 1440, we might be able to see it says 3/4. That's a big flipping hole, big chunk of meat right there. Now, reason you might not want to use a 3/4 in a sausage, you might not. You might want to grind up the fat at 3/4 to give you those big white blobs. But if you do a sausage and you dry it a lot, remember your fat doesn't necessarily dry up and shrink like the meat does, because it doesn't have that. The water doesn't come out of the oil or the fat or the grease or whatever you might want to call it. So that's the big side. That's what we're talking about when it talks about after. Here we go. 3 1/3%, 3.3% salt, and it can't be any bigger than 3/4 of an inch, the pieces. And then it says after being stuffed, the sausage having a diameter not greater than 3.5 inches, which is a big old sausage. Right. it has to be smoked not less than 40 hours and not lower than 80 degrees. So, and then it's a little bit of a modification here below, and you can check that particular method out, and you can be held in a room not less than 10 days, where we were 20 days in method 1. And of course, we can take it from the drying room no sooner than 18 days. So overall, if you use method number 2, and this is the kind of suggestion that you can model your HACCP after, or your part of your HACCP after, we went from 20 days to 18. We had 15 in the first one, but you couldn't get it out of the room until 20. So here in this case, you're down to 10 days, but you can't take it out for 18. So there's a lot of specifics that you'd want to make sure meets in there. Now, we also have a little something just right below it. It talks about sausages exceeding 3.5 inches, but not exceeding 4 inches in diameter at the time of stuffing, should be held in dry room following smoking not less than 25 days. And that's because, as you can see, we went from 25 days for the 4-inch sausage to the ones that are less than that to 10 days. So they're really piling on the time for that in that particular standard. Well, if we go down, we can see the head of number 3 here, right? Now it says held in pickle curing media, then dried. Okay, that means like what we're kind of thinking about, like what I did to the coppa. My coppas, I actually have them in a bag in the pickling solution that's wrapped around the outside of that, right? Versus, the way I'm looking at it, a sausage that we grind it up immediately, we salt it immediately, and then we do either 1 and 2. This is number 3, which says, okay, we're going to do the meat first, and then we're going to put it in the casing. And we're going to use, because we're the government, we're going to use lots and lots of words in this description. And I'm not going to read all this. I just want to give you the idea. The meat should be ground or chopped into pieces not exceeding that same 3/4 of an inch. Dry curing mixture containing less than 3 1/3% of salt and if the unstuffed sausage shall be thoroughly mixed with the meat. We're going to mix it right away. We're going to salt it right away after adding the salt or other curing materials. But before stuffing, the ground or chopped meat should be held at a temperature not lower than 34 degrees Fahrenheit for not less than 36 hours. Now, we haven't seen this because I don't think this video is released yet, but we know, like in the case of botulinum can live at very well at 38 degrees. They say well below 38 it doesn't really like to live, and it doesn't really like to live below 4.6 on the pH scale, and it really loves it at 120 degrees. So what we're doing is, that's one thing, and that's an anaerobic bacteria, so we would have it closed in where it couldn't breathe and have it, no oxygen available. Oxygen would need to be consumed with it. That differs from the biological contamination. I know I'm doing worms and parasites, but the biological contamination of, say, listeria can live at refrigerator temperatures. So we go back to this and it says, okay, we're going to chop it. We're going to brine it up. We're probably going to leave it in giant tubs, waiting for, maybe with a screen at the bottom, to let all the myoglobin leach out of it. And then we're going to keep it in there for 34 degrees at 36 hours minimum. And then it says, after being stuffed, the sausage should be held at a temperature continuing the 34 degrees for a time period not less than 144 hours. And 12 goes into 12, 24. So that's 6 days worth of time at 34 degrees after you've got that. Now, I will show you in an additional video the equipment. When I get past this sausage I just did, this run through on a sausage, I'll show you some of the equipment, because some of these methods may work really well for you if you have the right kind of equipment. Now, I have different types of equipment. I can do different types of method. But if you're just starting out, maybe one of these methods like this one will be better for you. I don't know it. You have to study up and figure out what you want to do. So anyway, that we've got that. Then it talks about, after this, or the sausage can be held at time, specifically in a pickle curing media not less than 50 degrees, right? The salometer reading at a temperature not lower than 44. Because what they're doing, I think, and I'm not a meat science guy, but I think what they're doing is they're raising that temperature just a little bit And they're going to let you knock some drying time off of it, because at that higher level, it's going to allow some biological activities to take place, right? So we're 10 degrees higher. And again, when I show you one of my cooling chambers, I can actually do that at 44 degrees, or I can raise it to 60 degrees or 70 degrees or whatever, let it run naturally at its maximum heat, right? Because I got no heater in there. So yeah, it depends on how your equipment's going to work for you to find a safe method to make sure you don't get the worms. All right, so I'm going to skip through the rest of that, and it talks about, all right, you have 15 hours and no lower than 90 degrees, 7 consecutive hours in smokehouse shall be maintained at 128 degrees, regarding, and you've got all these different things. Number 4, we're going to come down, it's going to be the same thing. It's going to be dried after stuffing, maybe heated or smoked, or both, heated and smoked, and it's going to give its little thing, because there is a version down here we're going to get to where we are going to have some options on changing how our time works depending on how we do it. And remember, we had up at the first in the header, number 5 may be coated with paraffin while held. All right. This one is the one exception they talked about, and it does talk about you got to do it for 65 days at a temperature not lower than 45, but it's all sealed up. Yeah, I'm not sure, and I like that one. I've never used that one. If you like this content, please go to calldeltosell.com, find the tab that says on YouTube, click it, and it'll open up a page of QR codes. There you can use a smartphone to scan and get to the YouTube page, or you can just mouse over and click it on a PC. There you'll be able to subscribe to this little button over here and click the notification bell so that YouTube will notify you. Thank you. Number 6. Now these are the ones I look at. Number 6A, the basic requirement is that your meat should not exceed 3/4 of an inch, and you got to do that same 3.3% of salt. All right, excluding the weight, what we're going to do is we're going to put the cure in there. We are going to let the sausage be held for 2 time periods. That's where our chart's going to come up, right? And we may be able to double up on our time period depending on which one we use. The holding period will be 48 hours in a room not lower than 35 degrees. That's usually what I do. I'll salt it up and get it ready. This holding period requirement may be fulfilled totally or in part before the drying period, and then the remainder, if any, after the drying period has an extension has expired. Okay, what we're going to do, we're going to start trimming some of these off with these 2 methods, A, B, and C. All right, these are pretty complicated. I have a little cheat sheet I made up. So what we're going to do is it's going to be no bigger than 3/4, right, of an inch meat parts, which means you're going to have the 3.3% of salt. And then you see how the size of sausage, because they're going to dry at different rates. They're going to get that final goal quicker. If it's a 1-inch sausage, 14 days. All right, 1.5, which is what my pepperonis are, they go to 15 days, and so on and so on. The bigger the sausage is, the longer it needs to stay in that drying room, and you're going to only have a fixed rate of dry. If you dry too quickly, you may get your percentage of net weight off, but you get that hard ring on the outside, and the center part is so soft that it dries the outside. It's almost like saran wrap or something. Inside rots, outside is too hard to do anything with. All right, so there we go. That's the base time frame. This is A. All right, we go all the way down here to B, reduction in drying time. During the drying period, the holding period, the sausage may be smoked or fermented. I ferment mine, so I get to I'm going to do the reduced drying time. If the temperature is increased to 70 degrees or higher while the sausage is being held after curing materials, but before the drying period, the subsequent drying room time prescribed for this method may be reduced, as in Table 3B. No interpolation of value is permissible. Now let me try to explain this, because this is where it gets interesting and you need to understand exactly how it works. All right, now we have Table 3A here. This is a % reduction in drying room time. That's Table 3. That's what we just looked at. Permitted by holding times and temperatures prior to drying. Right? See that footnote number 1. Well, we're going to look at part of footnote number 1, but let's go look at what it says up here for a standard day here. We were back up here, and it was saying Table 3, sausage drying room times by treatment number 6, right? So let's look at this one that says 20 days for a 3-inch sausage. Let's go on down. I think this is the one that the footnote uses. There we are, table 3A. So we're saying if allowed to ferment after addition of curing materials at 80 degrees Fahrenheit for 48 hours, the 20-day drying time may be reduced by 18%. All right, we're at 80 degrees Fahrenheit, and we went 48 hours, so we get to take 18% off of that 20 days. Right? Now, when we look at the example that you haven't seen yet, it's like the next video up. I'm using a particular type of culture to run, and I can either do it slowly over a period of time and hit this 48 hours, or I can do it inside 24 hours, in which case I would do the same thing if I had my, let's say, 2.5-inch sausage. So an example I would use is this. The sausage I did in that video was 2.5 inches. All right, it was less than that actually, but we had to round it up. 18 days is what it says it needs in the drying room. All right, when I come down to here, because I fermented at 105 degrees, it was actually, I varied it honestly somewhat, but had I kept it at 105 degrees for 24 hours, which is pretty much on target, I would have been able to reduce my 18-day holding time 57%. Okay, now if I did it on the slow ferment at 80 degrees Fahrenheit, and I took the 48 hours to do it, I would be able to take 18% off of the mandatory 18 days. So it's 18 days off of 18% had I gone on the slower route at 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Now we have other options. We just saw how fermenting, basically the heat of the fermenting, the holding time, whether it was fermented or not, the holding time can affect how long the time in the drying chamber needs to be. It actually reduces it. What if you wanted to reduce the amount of salt? Say you've got a variety of sausage or style or type, whatever you want to call it. You have a recipe that you don't want to put in as much salt as that 3.3% or 3.3 pounds for hundredweight. You don't want to put 3.3% salt in it. It'd be too salty for that particular style. You want it to be something less. Well, let's go ahead and look at this up here. Reduced salt content drying time. All right. Now I'm going to go ahead, since we've seen the title of this for C, part C, we're going to roll it down and see what it says. It says salt content of less than 3.3% for sausage formulation, excluding dry ingredients such as salt, sugars, and spices, may be permitted, provided that drying time is increased according to the contained table 3B. That's this next one. And it's going to say required percentages in that first table we looked at, table 3, for added salts of less than 3.3%. We're going to do this. We're going to take, this is the percentage of salt on the left, and this one is percent increase of drying room time. Just like we had in table 3A, we decreased that drying room time. Now, because we're using less salt, we're going to increase the drying room time. And that's all that's saying. Say I have a pepperoni and I have my pepper, I usually like around 2.7%. Well, that's going to give me a 19% required increase in my drying room time. Now we use, what was it? That 18 days came off because we were using a 2.5 inch part on that table 3. It was, you can't round down, you have to round up. There's no interpolation. So since it's a little more than 2, when it's stuffed, I had to go to 2.5, and for 2.5 sausage, I need 18 days. I got to reduce it a certain number of percent because I ferment it, but I also have to then increase it because I'm using less salt, if that makes sense to you. Well, we're just about done. We have one more method I'm going to get to in this video. It's method 7, and it's quite a bit different. Let's take a look. We're going to read it word for word to make sure we understand it. The title is Sausage Treatment Method Number 7, Holding, Heating, and Drying Treatment. Dry sausages. A is the general requirements. The establishment should use meat particles reduced in size to no more than 1/4 inch. The establishment should add a curing mixture containing no less than 2.7 pounds of salt per 100 pounds of meat and mix it uniformly throughout the product. The establishment should hold, heat, and dry product according to the paragraph B or C below. Now, I did get a few articles out of place, but let's talk about what we've seen up to this point. Up to this point, the various methods were using a particle size no bigger than this right here, at 3/4 of an inch. Now, we have a new requirement. We were 3/4 of an inch and 3.3%. So our new requirement in method 7 says no bigger than 1/4 inch, which is still a pretty good size, for a piece of meat or fat coming through it. It's pretty good size. I certainly use a lot smaller for other things, but that's the requirement. If you want to go from 3.3% and 3/4 inch, we go down to, with this method, to 1/4 inch, no larger than 1/4, and 2.7%. We don't have to do any added time or anything like we just saw in the previous. So let's go look at what it says. Let me just bring this on down because this is a little bit confusing. Now it says, remember, we're going to do B or C. And it says holding, heating, and drying treatment for large sausages. Except as permitted in C. That would be down here, right here, C, heating and treatment. It's saying except as permitted in C below, the establishment should subject sausages in casings not exceeding 105 millimeters in diameter at the time of stuffing to all of the following minimum chamber temperatures and time periods. Now, 105, I've got another video out here. I don't know where it's going to go in the order. I have to look at the numbers. But the new larger size of copper casings that I use are 100 millimeters. So 105 is bigger in diameter than my coppas are. Now, my coppas do kind of squish in there a little bit. They're not just fall in, but 105 is a pretty big size of casing. In fact, we could see it say 105 is 4.8 inches, which I would suggest is probably about like a bologna case or something of that nature. Now, remember what it says right here, and we're just going to read what the English language says. To all of the following minimum chamber temperatures and time periods. When I look at it, it seems to say if it's 4.8 inches or less, 4.18, 4.125, we're going to put it in at 50 degrees for 12 hours. Then it looks like we're going to go to 90 degrees for 30 or 32.2 C if you were going to do the British scale, 1 hour. Each of these next ones, stepping up by 10 degrees each time, 100, 37.8 an hour, 110, 43.4, 1 hour, 120, 48.9, 1 hour, and it looks like we're going to eventually end up with 125 or 51.7 for 7 hours. Now, to be honest, they don't tell you what order to put them in. So it looks like we could either start low and go high or start high and come low. And it doesn't say, it just says all. If we go back and reread that, it says at the time of stuffing, if it's at 105, not bigger than 105, we're going to, at time of stuffing, to all of the following minimum chamber temperatures and time periods. That's a big one, big old fat sausage that one is, right? And what's it say? Following the preceding treatment, the establishment should dry the sausages at a temperature not lower than 50 degrees Fahrenheit, 10 degrees C, for not less than 7 days a week. So if we're 4.8 inches, 4.125 inches at the time of stuffing, and we take them through this little rigmarole right here, we're going to hold it at 50 degrees, no lower than 50 for 7 days. Now, they might hold them at 80 degrees and it would comply. They could hold it at another 100 degrees or whatever. Any of these temperatures would work. They just can't be any colder than 50. Now, I want to go back up just long enough to make sure you see this. That was this. B, holding in temperature sausages except as permitted in C, which we're just going to do. We just did B. So we're going to come down, roll down here. Now we're at C. This is a new section. It doesn't have a line in it, but this is the next one, the C, the heating and drying and treatment of small sausages. Alternatively, the establishment may subject sausages in cases not exceeding 55 millimeter at the time of stuffing to all of the following minimum chamber temperatures and time periods. Now remember what we said, the one I just used for my sopressata-like sausage, that's a few videos after this one. It's a little more than 2 inches. So we have to go 2.5 previously in method 6. Here we're going to go 2.8 inches or less, which will get it because it's a 55 millimeter casing. And it's very similar, 50 degrees, 10 degrees for 12 hours, 100 degrees Fahrenheit, 37.8 for 1 hour, 125 or 51.7 for 6. Now what we're seeing, we're going to turn around after we do those, we're going to, following the preceding heat treatment, that's up here, C, the establishment should dry the sausages at a temperature no lower than 50 degrees Fahrenheit, 10 degrees, for not less than 4 days. So between the two of them, one of them, the big fat sausages, we got a lot more steps, and I guess that's because they're probably trying to ramp up from that big casing in toward the center of the meat, and they don't want to just do it too quick. It might sear or almost cook the outside, kind of like a dry hard ring does on a sausage, not letting the inside get what it needs in case of dehydration. And maybe this way they're concerned about not getting to the center of that big mass of meat. We are limited to 1/4 inch, and we are limited to 2.7% or more. You can be more than that, but you can't be less than 2.7. This method that we just read, method 7, does not allow for changing of the times less, and it doesn't allow for less salt. That's one thing that I noticed. Now, we are done with sausages, because when we look back up here, we see we're right up now from sausages. We're number 1 to capicola is number 2. I think I said it was a different number earlier in the first part of the video. And 3 were coppas. So the manual has so much in it, so many pages to it, it can get lost in your A's and B's and your tables and all that kind of stuff. But remember, it's going to start out 1 with sausages, go through all the different methods. Then we're going to hit 2, which is going to be capicola is number 2. And number 3 are the coppas, and they're a little bit different. 4, we'll see, would be the hams and shoulders, that kind of thing with the bones in. And we're just not going to do all that in this little video because we're probably close to 30 minutes as it is. We appreciate you watching. Please, 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 it helps out a lot if you'll hit the subscribe button and you do sharing and that you comment on it. On these videos. The interactions tell the algorithm so much, and I don't know how they're individually weighted, but it makes a big difference. We'll see you in the next video.